Благослови, владико.
Благословен Бог наш, завжди нині повсякчас і на віки віки.
Поглянь, засуди оселі Твоєї, і на всіх людей Твоїх землі української, і охорони їх, час тяжких іспитів, полегши тугу, недолю, горе та смуток наш, стратою мільйонів жертв нашого народу в час Голодомору, звідсани у вірі, бережи у церкві святі, збережи їх від смертоносної рани і всякої недуги душевної і тілесної, яви силу Твою і прийди, та захисти їх, щоби не зрадів, ворог бачити зневіру і відступство, і від церкви святої Твоєї, вислухай нас і помилуй.
Ще молимось за упокоєння душ спочилих рабів Твоїх, одних незабутніх мільйонів жертв Голодомору, батьків, матерів, дітей, братів і сестер наших, і за відпущення всякої провини, вільної і невільної.
Щоб Господь Бог оселив душі їх там, де праведні спочивають.
Милости Божий, Царство Небесне, відпущення гріхів віку Христа, безсмертного Царя Бога нашого, просімо.
Господеві помолімся.
Боже, духи від всякої плоті, ти смертю смерть подолав, і диявола знищив, і життя світу Твоєму дарував. Сам, Господи, упокой душі спочилих рабів Твоїх, голодом замучених, батьків, матерів, дітей, братів і сестер наших, які імена Ти сам, Господи, знаєш, в місті світлі, в місті квітучі, в місті спокою, де немає ні болю, ні журби, ні зітхання, всякий гріх, що вони вчинили словом, чи ділом, чи думкою, як благий і чоловіколюбний Бог простив, бо немає людини, яка б жила і не згрішила. Ти один і без гріха, правда Твоя, правда вовіки, і слово Твоє є істина.
Бо Ти є власний сіння і жичай спокій почали грабів Твоїх, голодом замучених батьків, матерей, дітей, братів і сестер наших, імена їх сам знаєш, Христе Боже наш, і Тобі славу посилаємо з беззначальним Тім Отцем, і з присвятим і глибочко Твоя, що він Бог, нині повсякчас і на віки вічні.
Христос
Сина. віки їхні вільні і невільні, чи то в слові, чи в ділі свідомо, чи несвідомо, все їм і нам прости, бо ти благий і чоловіколюбець.
Ваше Високопреосвященство, Владико Андрію, Ваше Преосвященство, Владико Стефане, всечесніші отці, шановні очевидці і родини очевидців, шановна громадо, dear bishops, clergy, witnesses and family of witnesses, dear government officials, community leaders, dear youth and guests, on behalf of Taras Bahri, President of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, Toronto Branch, I would like to welcome you to the commemoration of the 84th anniversary of the Holodomor. My name is Tamara Kowalczyk, and I am honored to be your Master of Ceremonies. We are gathered here today to commemorate, in tandem with Ukraine, the Holodomor, a very solemn occasion in our Ukrainian and world history. Between 1932 and 1933, the Soviet regime deliberately, methodically, and systematically murdered millions of ethnic Ukrainians. Imagine the Air Canada Centre filled with 20,000 fans for a Maple Leafs game. Now, imagine if the people in that arena ceased to exist. At the height of the Holodomor, an estimated 25,000 people or more were dying every single day. Today, as a nation and as part of the global community, we pay respect to the millions of Ukrainians who suffered under the Soviet regime. Here in the audience among us, we are fortunate to have 3 survivors of the Holodomor: Mr. and Mrs. Latishko, and Mrs. Tkachenko. We also have several descendants of victims of the Holodomor with us today. The Holodomor claimed millions of lives and impacted millions more. All those affected have a unique story. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Walter Volodya Dashko to share one such story with us.
Thank you, Reverend Fathers, honored guests, friends. I'm honored to speak today on behalf of my mother, the family, and all the survivors of the Holodomor. My words will be brief, they will be in English. I will not delve into the depths and the darkness and the scope of the Great Famine, genocide, the Holodomor. We're fortunate that finally very many great texts are available, written by Robert Conquest, James Mason, most recently, and Applebaum. I encourage you to read these. Tonight, I would like to tell you a story about Volodya. Volodya was a happy little boy who lived in a small village in Ukraine 85 years ago. I'd like to tell you a little about him and about the time he was 4 and 5 years old. In so many ways, little Volodya was like so many little boys. He had friends and brothers and sisters, and he loved playing with every one of them, and everyone loved little Volodya. Volodya jumped, ran, sang songs his sister taught him, loved to gulp cold water on hot sunny days and sip steaming tea on cold winter nights. He loved climbing trees and hiding in tall wheat. He loved his barnyard animal friends, and he especially loved chasing and hugging the geese. He loved Christmas Eve and Easter morning. He loved sweets and honey, and especially freshly baked bread. But the things Volodya loved the most were his mother and father and his 8-year-old sister, Tatiana. And they all very much loved him. Tatiana is my mother. She's now 93 and far too frail and weak to come here and tell you the story of her beloved Volodya herself. Little Volodya was the youngest of the uncles I never got to know. Volodya, Tatiana, and their family lived in a little village still named Krasnosilka. From Kyiv, it's a 2.5-hour drive west through the city of Zhytomyr and the town of Trudniv. The countryside there is beautiful. You should visit. When Volodya was born in 1928, life in his village, or most anywhere in Ukraine, was not easy. In the 10 years that preceded his birth, Ukraine had been engulfed in total chaos, bitter civil strife, and total collapse of authority. 6 different armies, Ukrainians, Bolsheviks, Whites, Entente, Poles, and anarchists, battled across the countryside. Kyiv, the capital, changed hands 5 times in less than a year. As the Bolsheviks, Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin, consolidated their power through the 1920s, the chaos of competing armies changed to the chaos of criminally inept leadership, terrorizing arrests, and party purges. By the time Volodya was born, Lenin was dead and gone, but his police state, now run by Stalin, began to brutally force industrialization and calamitous collectivization. But what did a little Volodya know about Lenin or Stalin? What could a four-year-old child know? How could he understand why strange men would come to the village and destroy the beautiful wooden church and all its wondrous icons? Or why his friends' fathers would disappear at night, never to be seen again? Their families kicked out of their homes, out onto the street, left to fend for themselves, helped only by very scared cousins, aunts, or uncles, or maybe the bravest of other villagers. What did Volodya know about so-called kulaks, or enemies of the state, or a place called Siberia, where other little children and their families were sent? What would a small child feel when strangers would arrive in the village and start taking people's horses and cows and pigs? What could Volodya think when neighbors would scream and protest and try and stop the strangers? Even more so, what did he feel when the strangers came to take away his family's animals, especially the beautiful chestnut-colored horses, his father's beloved horses? What could Volodya feel when he saw the strangers savagely beat his father, leaving him bloody and dead by the next day? Volodya's father, my grandfather, died when he was only 45. Little Volodya missed his father. He missed the way his father bounced him on his knee. He missed his kind smile, his gentle strength. And while those were dark days, these would not be little Volodya's worst. Resistance to collectivization in Ukraine could not be very organized, but it was strong. The greater the opposition, however, the more brutal was the reaction by the Soviet state police. Beginning in the summer and fall of 1932, Volodya's village, like so many villages in Ukraine, were commanded to deliver more grain than they had ever produced. And then quotas were increased, and leather-coated strangers and soldiers came to collect, again and again and again. And when all the grain had been seized, even the seed grain for the following year's crop, they took whatever food the villagers had saved, hidden for the winter. They ransacked village houses, barns, stables, sheds, outhouses, walls, trees, anywhere, any food, even a small amount, might be hidden. If anything was found, it was immediately taken away or destroyed. And the villagers who dared to disobey were beaten, taken away, never to be seen again, or simply shot on the spot. And so it was in Volodya's village in 1932. As winter came, with no food left, Volodya's mother, now a widow, gathered dried grasses, weeds, barks, leaves, and roots. From these, she would try to make soup, or something approximating soup, as best she could. Or she would grind them between two small millstones she had hidden under the floorboards of their house. From the grindings, she would make a type of flour, which she would use to make something like a cake or a bread. Without the millstones, the weeds and roots would be very difficult to eat, and especially to digest. As the snow fell through the winter of 1932-33, finding any scraps of nature became difficult. Eventually, even these sources, at least those near the village, disappeared. Stray cats and dogs, even birds, had disappeared long before. Villagers became increasingly weak and frail, and with time, slowly, horribly, began to die of starvation. And the strangers in the leather coats kept searching, and eventually they uncovered the millstones hidden by Volodya's mother. While they spared her life, they sadistically smashed the millstones. Even so, Volodya's mother did everything she could to keep spirits up. She would often remind the children that spring would soon come, and then summer, and with the warm sun will come berries, fruit, grain, and so bread. Beautiful, delicious, fresh baked bread for Volodya. In Volodya's village, the number of empty houses continued to grow through the spring of 1933. Even though they were desperately hungry, Volodya and Tatiana continued to hope and dream. In early June of 1933, on the holy day of Pentecost, when villagers would visit and pray at the graves of departed relatives and friends, Volodya and Tatiana visited the grave of their father in the cemetery near where the beautiful wooden church once stood. Tired, they prayed, laid down, and soon fell asleep in the warm spring sun. When they awoke, they noticed small green cherry buds that were just beginning to sprout on the high branches of a tree above the grave. Most buds were gone. Only those on the highest branches remained. Volodya and Tatiana scrambled up the tree as best they could, never quite reaching them, when they heard their mother call them home. At home, their mother asked them what they did all day. "We talked with Father," instantly proclaimed a happy little Volodya. A little taken aback, his mother asked, "Really? What did he say?" Little Volodya immediately answered, "He told us to come back when the cherries are red." And while spring was warmer than winter, food was still scarce, and the growing number of weak and infirm villagers continued to wither and die. Those villagers fortunate enough to have survived the early days of the summer of 1933 finally began to really believe that soon, very soon, everything was going to be finally better. One evening in early July, little Volodya asked his mother if she could bake some bread. She gave him a kiss, smiled, and said, "Maybe tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, well then very soon." The next morning, little Volodya did not wake. They buried him in the cemetery near where the beautiful wooden church once stood. They buried little Volodya beside his beloved father under the cherry tree, whose fruit was just turning a deep, deep red. Please remember, little Volodya, and all the other Volodjas, who instead of being allowed to play and learn and grow up and help to make this a better world, were mercilessly and horribly murdered. They did not ask to be heroes. They just wanted to be children. Wieczny im pamięć.
Thank you, Mr. Volodya Dushko. One of the tragedies of the Holodomor is that many of those who suffered through it could not share their story. Thank you for sharing with us your family story and for giving a voice to the millions of children who perished during the Holodomor. In our continual effort to preserve and honor the memory, as well as bring awareness about the Holodomor, we are honored that on June 3rd last year, the Exhibition Place's Board of Governors recommended entering into a donation agreement with the board, the City of Toronto, and the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Toronto Branch to create a Holodomor Memorial in our city. This past May, we amassed at the Exhibition Place to bless the site of the Holodomor Memorial Parquet, where the statue, known as the Bitter Memory of Childhood, will be erected. And next year, we will be able to gather on those grounds to pay our respects. I would now like to call upon Mr. Taras Bahri, President of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, Toronto Branch, for a few words.
Slava Isusu Christu! Many stirring comments have been made by our MC and guest speakers today. We as Canadians and Ukrainians have a great responsibility to be the voice of those victims who could never tell their story. And it is in that light we would like to thank our clergy and all those present today for praying for the souls of the victims. As well, on behalf of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Toronto Branch, we would like to thank the federal and provincial governments and all the parties for their unanimous actions in Parliament in recognizing the Holodomor as a genocide against the Ukrainian people. And to the City of Toronto for their blessing of the Holodomor Memorial Project. Our voices need to prevail so that the deliberate denial for food is never to be used as a weapon anywhere, ever again. I ask you tonight at 7:32 and 7:33 p.m. in unison with the Ukrainians all over the world to have a moment of the reflection as you light a candle in memory of those souls. And remember that no one should ever be denied their daily bread. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bahri. I would again like to acknowledge that all levels of government have an important role in ensuring we remember and learn from the Holodomor. We are grateful for their continued support and have received proclamations from the federal and provincial levels, which you can read on the UCC Toronto website. I would like to acknowledge those members among us here today. Our federal members of Parliament, representing Davenport, Julie Zarovich, representing York Southweston, the Honorable Ahmed Hussain, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, representing Etobicoke Lakeshore, James Maloney, representing Mississauga Lakeshore, Sven Spangman, representing Parkdale High Park, Arif Varani, representing Etobicoke Centre, Boris Jasnowski. Our members of Provincial Parliament, representing Etobicoke Centre, Yvonne Baker, representing Mississauga East Crooksville, the Honourable Deepika Damarla, Minister of Seniors Affairs, representing Renfrew Nipissing Pembroke, John Yakubuski. I would also like to recognize Toronto District School Board Trustee for Etobicoke Centre, Chris Glover, the Consul General of Ukraine in Toronto, Mr. Andriy Vasilovsky, and National President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Mr. Paul Grod. Preserving the memory of this tragedy can only be achieved through continual efforts of our entire community. It is only when we work together that we can realize this goal. So thank you to all those who have attended this memorial service today, and to all those who continue to work tirelessly to pass on the knowledge of the Holodomor. Thank you to our survivors who remain strong in faith and in spirit. Through sharing your stories and experiences, you help future generations ensure that the Holodomor is never forgotten. Now to our youth, including our youth organizations, Sum Mississauga and Sum Etobicoke, Plast, Muna, and Odum, who along with their leaders, steadfastly and respectfully support and honor our survivors. The torch of knowledge is passed on to you to teach others about the Holodomor and to stand up for human rights in times of injustice. To everyone in attendance, remember that the price of freedom is constant vigilance. Your presence today declares that current and future generations will not forget the victims of the Holodomor, those murdered by starvation, and all those who have died under oppression and terror. This commemoration strengthens our resolve to reject intolerance. And as we light our candles tonight at 19:32 to 19:33 p.m., let us make a commitment to continue to shed light on the Holodomor and make every effort to preserve the memory of those who perished. May their memory be eternal. Vichna yin pamyat.
Ми щиро дякуємо всім вам, дорогі браті і сестри, що ви так чисельно сьогодні прибули, щоб пом'янути молитвою всіх загинувших від великого Голодомору. Пам'ятаємо, що на другий рік ми вступаємо в круглу дату цієї трагедії – 85 років. Нехай з нашої пам'яті, а особливо з наших майбутніх поколінь, наших дітей і онуків, ніколи не забувається те, що пережили наші діди і прадіди. А пам'ять загиблих хай буде вічною, вічна я їм пам'ять. Слава Ісусу Христу!